The Drum Candy Podcast is brought to you by Drum Factory Direct.
What's up, everyone? Welcome into the Drum Candy Podcast. This is your host, Mike Dawson, coming to you from Drum Factory Direct in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. We are going to wrap up Season 6 with a two-part episode. We have 10 Reasons to Love the great Peter Erskine. Peter Erskine is a legendary American jazz drummer. He got his first big gig in 1972 as a member of the Stan Kenton Orchestra, and then 4 years later he hooked up with Maynard Ferguson, and then in 1978 he joined the legendary fusion band Weather Report. After Weather Report, Peter played with just about everybody. He was in Steps Ahead, he toured a bit with Chick Corea, and tons and tons of stuff. So we're going to get into a bit of his discography here. I've got David Throckmorton and Thomas Wendt in studio. We're going to do the first 5 of 10 Reasons to Love the great Peter Erskine. Let's dive into 10 Reasons to Love Peter Erskine. Again, like last episode, I'm letting you two handle all the picks, because for me, I came into Peter Erskine in the 90s when he's doing more kind of teaching and through his articles and his videos. I can honestly say I've never listened to a record. But at the same time,
that's impossible. You have to have heard something.
Really? But one of the most influential drummers in my entire life because of his educational products. Like, he was my gateway into straight ahead jazz by his first Everything is Timekeeping.
Really? DCI videos, yeah.
So he has a huge importance for me, but not in the music. Like, I'm just completely ignorant to his discography largely.
Wow.
So let's go.
Well, the discography's, I mean,
it's deep.
It's deep. There's so much. And kind of like some of these other ones we've done with these drummers. I don't know how many of these we've done so far, 15 or 20 or something, but you can't cover everything in 10 picks. And then for me, like, sometimes I tend to get these certain eras.
Yeah.
You know? Like when we did Tane, it was like from a certain period, or even Weckel, or even Elvin to a degree. Maybe we might have had a little bit of later stuff, but so I think most of my stuff from Peter is within maybe like a 10 to 15 year window here, and I'm sure there's been great stuff before that and tons of great stuff after that. Most of my stuff is from probably the early 80s through the mid 90s.
Yeah, me too.
So do you want to just start with one of them?
Let's dive right in. I mean, maybe a little bit of background on what he was doing before this era. What's his first gig was Stan Kenton. Is that possible?
There's a lot of recordings of him playing with Kenton.
Yeah, and he played with Maynard.
Yeah, Maynard after that. And then Weather Report.
And I'm not there was probably other stuff all through there that I don't really know.
I guess he kind of rose to prominence with Weather Report, right? Like, as far as the public.
Since we're talking about Weather Report, let's just move. Let's move to number 2 then. Right. We'll play something from Weather Report.
If you think about it, like that's a big leap in early career. Stan Kenton to Maynard to Weather Report, right?
Yeah.
That's like, wow, It's
yeah,
pretty amazing.
So you chose NYC. Is there a particular reason? This is off of their self-titled record, I believe.
Well, there's a couple self-titled records. That's the second one.
Okay.
I mean, there's only a few records with Peter in the band. I tend to like, I like Weather Report in general. I tend to like the later stuff a little more, like Peter, and then the Omar years are kind of my favorite. And this is one of the later ones with Peter, and I think it's really cool. I just, I always loved Wayne, Joe, Jocko's amazing, and Peter just plays great, man. It's just. And it's funny, this record specifically reminds me, it's like the most similar to the stuff after when Omar and Victor Bailey got in the band. It kind of like, for a while there, I was like, I don't understand where these guys got this. But if you hear the couple of records leading up, it's obviously just a nice continuation of the band and the sound they were developing. I think this came out in 82, I believe. And this is kind of early in the track. I think only 20 seconds in, 19 seconds in.
So the 19 seconds to 2 minutes and 30 seconds of NYC. Here we go.
sounds great.
It's just interesting music, man. Like Mike, when we went to Nick's that time on that trip,
Yeah.
on the way back we listened to those 3 Omar records.
Never heard one note.
And
of
you
them.
were talking about how like you had never, and this is really similar to that.
Yeah.
in a way.
It's so out for being as kind of commercially successful as they are. It's so out.
Yeah.
And there's nothing else like it.
No,
Like,
that's true.
You know, you put Joe and Wayne together, like they just had this world that
Yes.
there's nothing else like it. People have copied it since, but it's their thing was not like, it doesn't sound anything like the fusion bands.
Right.
Like all those guys that put together the important fusion bands, all the people that came out of Miles' group, whether it be Mahavishnu or
Sure.
Herbie and Headhunters
Yep.
or Turner Forever,
Yep.
on and on and on. Tony Williams' group. I mean, like this stuff doesn't sound like. I mean, all those bands are totally different. So
Yeah.
all those bands have that distinction, but
The way that
band
Joe
is so-
uses synthesizers is so personal and unique.
yeah.
You know?
And the use of percussion too. with
Is
the
that
drums.
Manolo playing on that?
I'm not sure who's on this one. I think it's Robbie.
Robbie Amin?
Bobby Thomas
Oh,
Jr.
Bobby Thomas Jr.
I believe, because I think that's who that is. I
Wow,
could be
okay.
wrong though.
Okay. I don't know. So.
I mean, I know the other guys. I mean, it's obviously just Joe, Jocko, Wayne, and Erskine. But
Yeah. I mean, you could talk about everything. Jocko, what a important ingredient in that.
That sound is just like,
Yeah.
wow, what is that, man?
Kinda,
Yeah.
There's like everyone has their own little spot, and
Yeah.
then Peter's able to do his thing on top of it.
He fit in really well.
yeah,
you
it's
know?
like he's got the jazz thing, in a way, like where some fusion guys don't, especially later fusion drummers don't have so much of the jazz.
He
side.
totally had that.
And then he has this kind of funky thing, which is he has his own way of doing that, which I've always really liked. I think two of the things I like about him the most, and there's a lot of things I really like about him, but is what he does with like compositions, the way he interprets them
100%.
and plays loosely, and it still feels grounded and focused and solid, without sounding like he's just jerking around, or
Totally.
messing around.
He serves the music well when he plays.
And then there's the other thing is I talk about a lot on these with different drummers. He's one I really love. This in particular is his kind of elasticity he plays with. The way
Yes.
he can pull and push, whether he's playing free or stuff or grooving music. He's got a really really beautiful pulling the time thing that it always just has resonated with me, whether it's Elvin doing that or Steve Gadd doing that or even guys like Weckl or something that does that too. But Erskine's really killing it. And also, man, I should say, like, I was born in 73, so all these 80s is just huge for me. You know, hearing whether it was like MTV kind of music or it was like stuff I heard growing up, which was maybe like 70s music my parents played, as well as some older jazz. But I was hearing some of this stuff at the house too, that it could have had Gadd or Erskine or Harvey Mason, some of those kind of
Sure.
drummers on there, or even John Robinson to some degree. But Erskine, I feel like he and Gadd were like so much of what I really got into with, like when I got into Weckl so heavy, was really coming out of like Erskine and Gadd. Like I really hear that in Dave's playing. So I kind of got a little more into Peter a few years after I was into Gadd and Weckl, but like the next guys for me would have been like Dennis and Vinny and Erskine, that weren't like straight ahead drummers, like Elvin or Tony. But I'm just kind of blabbering, but he plays his butt off, man. He's so great.
I can't pinpoint where he's coming from. Like all the history is there, but it's not like, you can hear the influence of other drummers on Tony. I don't know what I'm getting. I mean, it's.
I hear a lot of different. I think he's a true product of his upbringing. There was a lot of. I mean, he was a kid in the '60s, so he was getting a lot of jazz, but then there was also
I think all that big band music,
big band music, funk and R&B. I mean, it was all. I hear all that in his playing personally, and I think you hear great parts of all those in his playing. Like I said, I mean, he can play straight ahead with the best of them if he wants, but he can also play serious pocket, backbeat grooves really well, all kind of different Afro-Cuban stuff.
Yeah, he's really
He's got a lot of
quite
bases.
amazing with that.
He's
Like,
got a lot of bases covered, man.
Yeah, I had so
You know?
much fun trying to pick the stuff I wanted to play and just kind of revisiting some of this music and you know, I just was sitting there thinking the whole time, like, man, he plays so great.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. And you can tell it's him within a couple notes, I think.
Yeah, I can.
Like his sound is
you know?
a very
Very
pinpoint
recognizable.
kind of sound. Like even when he plays straight ahead, he usually has more fusiony sounding drums.
Sometimes.
Sometimes, yeah.
It's never like as totally like, you know, 60s Blue Note kind of sound
I've never
drums
heard
or
him
something
do
like that. But he's something else, man.
His I think one thing that I've come to really love about him is whatever groove he's playing, there's an authenticity to it. You can tell that he's checked out whatever the history is behind that feel, and it's like it's not somebody who's just kind of imitating, or it's like he knows. Like when he swings, it's like, okay, he's really checked out.
Well, I think some of the guys like in like the 80s and 90s you see in magazines that would kind of get compared to him. Like, I'm not talking about these like icon, like fusion guys like Gadd or Weckl or Vinny or Dennis Chambers, but like some other guys that might have been more like educator kind of guys. To me, Erskine never sounds like those guys.
No.
He sounds like it's all about the music.
Yes.
And he sounds like it's all about being creative. And even when he plays simply, it's beautiful, but it's never boring to me. Or some people sound real like they're trying to do like what's correct, and there's not a lot of life to it. But his stuff always, to me, is filled with life,
Totally.
and dynamics and all that stuff I was talking about earlier.
He has a great clarity to his playing too.
Yeah, his ride cymbal's very clear.
Yeah, and even like when he executes stuff, there's a clarity, and
There's a confidence to his playing.
Yeah.
He's not he's going to put it where he wants to put it.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
Well, let's just dig into another one. This is some cool music.
Yeah.
I don't know that record. The record, it's the second self-titled Weather Report record.
Yeah. Let's maybe do this, then we'll maybe move into one of Tom's after that.
All right. So we're going to... So
It's
this
the John Abercrombie record.
So this is the band that plays with him on his videos.
Correct.
So that
Mark
music...
Johnson.
Yeah, that music I absolutely loved. I don't know why I never sought out the records. I guess the videos just did it for me. I watched them every day.
The videos are cool.
They played a couple... They probably played 4 or 5 songs on each one of them. So this is... What's the record called?
It's called Current Events. Yeah.
Oh yeah, 85 or so, I think.
Yeah, it's probably mid
80s.
80s.
And we're starting at the top of the track called Clint. Why did you pick this one?
I remember getting this on a cassette, probably in the late 80s. The more I started buying records and was old enough to go and coming to... I lived like a half hour south of Pittsburgh. I started coming into Pittsburgh a lot with friends, going to record stores. And I remember I just found this on a cassette. And I'm hearing it on the way home in the car with a buddy of mine and hearing this track. And I was just like, man, he sounds so amazing. That's all it is. It's just like a lot of nostalgia. And I just think it's really cool, like the way he played. And again, like this is like before people were hearing Weckl and Dennis Chambers and those guys.
Yeah,
like,
it's hard to keep that in mind because they're often like on the same timeline.
Yeah. So for me, you hear guys slightly after that, and I can hear all this connection to Peter. You know,
I think he's a much more influential drummer than he's ever given credit for.
Yeah,
you know.
Yeah, totally. And I think he probably was more like in that era because he was so
visible. Yeah.
So visible, and now it's like you don't see. You know, guys get older, and
sure,
and there's all this young stuff happening.
Yeah.
You know, and he's still doing great stuff. And I'm not even familiar with everything, but this era, I've checked out so much of it, and this is some bad stuff.
Why did you buy this cassette? Did you hear about it?
Well, I just knew about the group, and I just was trying to find things. And I think sometimes then too, like I think I bought this at Jerry's when they were in Oakland. And like you could go upstairs, and you could. Well, and a lot of the jazz CDs at that time were upstairs too.
Right.
And then they had like the wall, with the cassettes, and you'd find a cassette for $2.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, I can get this for $2. I only brought 15.
So that's a good thing, man.
I'm gonna grab this $2 cassette. You know, like I think right around the same time I got that Steve Conn Eyewitness record with Steve Jordan, and that was the first time I heard that band with Steve because they did the record with Weckl later, and I went back to check out what the band had done previously. So to get those on, however you could find them.
Right.
There was no YouTube. There was no streaming.
You had to go out in the wild.
Yeah. So this was this was a big one for me. Like just especially this track, I was just blown away.
Cool.
So we're taking it from the top.
Yeah. Cool little groove there at the end.
That's bad, yeah.
The way he navigates around the time, you're right. It's so special.
It's like loose but strong.
Yeah.
And like the bass drum sounds kind of
It
like
sounds great.
It's more like jazzy sound.
Yeah, it sounds good.
Like I remember in the early 90s, and this is all just my take on, this is my journey through hearing all these drummers. But like when I keep bringing up Weckel, when Weckel left the Electric Band, Chick got that band with Gary Novak. And I talked to Gary a bunch back then, and I was going to see the band, and Chick encouraged him to like use a smaller kit with like more jazz sound, so he didn't get compared to like Weckel so much, because everybody would come out and kind of heckle and like want the original guys there. But like that sound of like him playing kind of fusion music with like an 18-inch bass drum tuned kind of in the middle,
it sounds good,
kind of fat, like that's how like that's kind of that sound.
Yeah,
kind of jazz, a little bit lower toms, but like the bass drum's still open and smaller. It's just a cool thing. Not because at that time everybody was playing like a 22 with pillows inside it,
Yeah.
And Peter did that too at times, but it's just cool to hear like the more resonant drums,
Definitely.
I think when you sent me this originally, my first thought was I can hear some Jack DeJohnette, like the special edition band or whatever. I'm hearing like that's the first connection I'm hearing to what came before him. Like there's a lot of Jack in this snare sound, the crack of it.
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
But I can't pinpoint anything else because he plays with so much more space. He's more like he's deliberate. There's not a lot of fluff.
Well, I feel like those fusion guys we think of like they were hot in like the late 80s, early 90s. So much of it was so technical.
Yeah.
And Peter's technical, but there's more space and it's more loose. So it's coming a little more from. He's like jazzier in a way than those guys.
Right. Totally.
That might be some way to frame it.
Yeah.
No, I agree.
Yeah, he's a unique character. That's a cool record too.
And he played with everybody.
Everybody.
Like at that time.
Yeah.
I mean, it's hard to find someone.
He's one of the busiest
he didn't
drummers
play with.
back then.
He's played with everybody.
Yeah.
I mean, he was kind of like he was in New York. I mean, but like he's kind of like right after Gadd, like enduring. But he played with everybody that Gadd played with, pretty much, and then everybody
and more
that the guys after him played with. He played with everyone.
Yeah. Wow.
Man, where do we go to next?
Let's do one of Tom's.
Let's do Elvin's Mambo. I was introduced to Peter through the Bob Mintzer big band records from the 1980s in 90, 91. And I was introduced to him through those, and then through the Everything is Timekeeping. And 13, 14-year-old me, I remember I really liked his playing, but I remember thinking like, man, he can kind of do anything, and it everything sounded so good.
Yeah,
it was clean, good sounds. It felt great. He had a great groove, no matter what groove he was playing. In the big band records, I mean, Bob Mincer's big band is a lot different than sort of a traditional big band.
Sure,
but the way he navigated all the charts, his musical contribution, everything was great. This is a really cool tune that Bob wrote, obviously, for Elvin Jones, and we're going to hear sort of this little breakdown section that moves into the tenor solo, and there's sort of like the rhythm section is kind of playing this ostinato, and there are these different horn sections, and the way that he's navigating the chart, he's sort of playing this kind of songoistic groove. It's like a real Afro-Cuban hybrid kind of groove, I guess. Everything that he's doing in it, I really like. So we can check it out and then respond to it.
All right, we're starting at 2:51 into Elvin's Mambo.
Yep.
So good. All of my Latin stuff is coming from learning his beats. For sure. As soon as I heard that, it's like, yeah, that's how I would play a song go. Like,
yeah,
that's exactly
But
it.
like, you notice how well he's working with Frankie Malaby. You know, he's playing some drums, you know, like, but he's such a good musician that it's like, it's never like, oh man, he's playing too much, or like, why is he doing that? It's none of that. It's just like, oh yeah, it's, you know, and the way he's kind of like, he's doing the job of a big band drummer, but he's also,
yeah, he also gets in there and gets active and,
Yeah.
and is playful.
Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah, there's a spot where he let the bass drum not play for a couple bars. You know, that was just a spur of the moment.
Yep.
And it was like, whoa.
or when he hit that splash on 4, and then he just let it ring for a second,
Yeah.
and then, you know what I mean? Just like little stuff that's just like, man, it
Yeah.
adds so much to the music, you know? So that was kind of, I remember I really enjoying how he played on those records. And then the Everything is Timekeeping video, I remember being young and just, he was so clear in what he said.
Yeah.
We were talking about this on the phone the other
Yeah.
night, you know? But it was for a young person, I got so much out of it. Like, he
Same.
wasn't talking over my head,
Yeah.
you know, just very good practical advice.
It sounds silly to say some of this stuff, like, but I think we agreed on this, like, and you watch those videos a lot too, like
Every day, yeah.
like you just felt like you were getting trustworthy,
Good info.
good information.
Yep.
You know, it
Yep.
wasn't preachy, it wasn't forceful, it wasn't look at me and check out all my amazing stuff. It was just, but like, there was so much music happening in the videos, you know.
I remember in those videos, really, I think it was one of the first times I noticed or consciously noticed like a drummer using space so well. Because when he would play on those videos with John and Mark, it was a lot, you know, where, I mean, they're just playing. Like, he's not demonstrating a certain thing. He's just like, now we're going to play this, you know.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking, like, wow, like, he's really not doing that much, but the music is so great. And I think I made a little connection, like, you know.
Yeah.
Being so young and hearing and seeing that was, you know, very impactful, you know.
Might be one of the greatest drum videos ever made. Those two series, I think.
Yeah, they're
just
really
for that,
great.
there's like so much information that
Great
that's
info.
allowed me to be a professional.
Yes.
You know,
Yep.
just by learning the way he explained comping, all of it.
Yep.
So good.
Yep. Absolutely.
So this is, I was telling you, Tom, that this is now on a compilation called The First Decade. But what was the original record called?
I believe that was on Art. Was it on Art of the Big Band?
Yes, that's what you have here.
Yeah.
AOD.
Yeah.
AOD. I didn't know what that meant.
Sorry. Art of the Big Band, yeah. I mean, all of those, you know, Incredible Journey, Camouflage, I mean, all those 80s Bob Mintzer Big Band records. On those records, like, there's so many different grooves, so many different kinds of arrangements, and man, he plays it all so well.
Yeah.
Let's go on to another one.
Let's do this third one.
Okay. Crossing the Corpus Callosum.
Wow.
So this is Mark Johnson's group Bass Desires.
Oh, yeah.
Which is Mark Johnson on bass, Bill Frisell on guitar, John Schofield on guitar, and Peter Erskine on drums. I had their first record. I remember, again, this is all pre-internet and everything, and I remember when Borders bookstores came to this area, they opened one in the South Hills,
Norman Center.
and I went out there like right when they opened, and they had this gigantic jazz department. And I just bought all this stuff that I couldn't find. I had a job at a National Record Mart where I basically only had to get the discount so I could buy music.
Of course.
Yeah.
I would work like 20 hours a week or whatever. And I remember going out there, and they had all this stuff, all this Blue Note stuff I would never see at National Record Mart, all this ECM stuff. And I didn't even know there was a second Bass Desires record. This is years later. This is like in the 90s.
Wow.
And I was like, oh my gosh, another Bass Desires record. So I bought this and got super into it. So let's give it a listen.
Yeah.
So this is from the top.
Wow.
Yeah, it's bad.
Man.
So that's Frizzell doing all that screaming guitar stuff?
The real like
Yeah.
I'm not gonna sing it. I mean, you can tell Sco and you can tell the difference. And that
Yeah.
little rhythmic thing that came in at the end, that was Frizzell too. And that was my first introduction to Frizzell too. It was before I got into like
Oh, really?
Bill's bands and motion
wow.
stuff. Yeah. I mean, I heard a little bit of Bill, but like hearing that first Bass Desires record was probably like the first I really heard of Frizzell. That record's called Second Sight, by the way, the second Bass Desires record.
Super cool. I hear a little bit of Weather Report-ish world, but still its own thing.
And it's like it's like it's not just like a static kind of beats. Like so much of that music at that time in the 80s and 90s were like kind of beat-ish music or grooves.
Yep.
He kind of it sounds more like an improviser in a way than a lot of guys.
Totally.
You know?
But yet, like you said, like his strong groove, like he establishes that, and then it's like, okay, now we can go some other places.
And you can hear like influence of like I hear Ornette's music in that.
Totally.
And like Old New Dreams.
Yeah.
And all these other things that I'm sure he's checked out all that music.
Yeah, man.
You know.
Great sound too, man.
And there's like I feel bad because there's I think 3 of my 7 picks I picked have Schofield on them.
That's okay.
But and they're all.
I'm surprised 5 of them don't have
They're
Schofield.
all different leaders.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And there's no John Schofield records with.
That's
people on
interesting.
it,
He's
you
a
know?
sideman on them. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
so
interesting.
They're both sidemen on these records.
Yeah.
You know?
Huh.
Interesting. Wonder why they never hooked up.
Well, they played a bunch, on all these records, but around this time, Sco would have had the band with Dennis, and Omar before that, and then
Like the Blue Matter band.
Blue Matter, Loud Jazz, and as soon as that ended, he kind of went into more straight ahead kind of sounding stuff.
Yeah. Wow.
And Peter was like playing with everybody that time. He's playing with Steps Ahead.
Oh, right.
And I mean, after Weather Report,
right.
and then he had his own groups and that stuff with Abercrombie. I mean, he played with everyone.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah,
The sound, like I want to mess with a high-tuned 18 with fusion toms. I've never done that, and it's kind of
and it's not super high. The 18, it's kind of like in the middle.
Yeah,
it's
it
not
sounds
low
good, though.
enough.
but
It's got that punchiness.
and he'll play into it,
He'll
play
be-
off it. He
yeah.
get all these different tones out of it.
I
He did
really
with
like
Weather
that.
Report, too. It's really great.
I like that aspect of his sound.
and
playing
that really that was huge for me
Yeah.
too. Like figuring that stuff out.
Yeah.
I mean, I'll say this now. In more recent years, like in the last 20 years, I started realizing like how much of his playing is in my playing, and I don't always know if it's like direct. Some of it is, but I think it's just the same influences come into our playing, and as I got more loose, started playing looser music and whatnot. In fact, I'm going to lead into this next one, number 5, and what I'll say about this is like. This is another ECM record with Jan Garbarek, however you say his name, Garbarek, and Miroslav on bass. This record called Star they made.
Oh, man, I don't know this.
And
I don't know any of this. Dude.
What year is this from, Throck?
this is in the later...
Late 80s?
Late 80s, or it might even be close to 90.
Okay.
I'm not exactly sure now that I'm thinking about it. I want to say late 80s.
Okay. Man,
I know there's some live footage of them from like the early 90s playing. So it could be a little later, like literally late 80s. But,
Okay.
But I remember specifically, and I might screw a little bit of this history up, but there was some, remember in Modern Drummer, they had those, they'd play like a blindfold test kind of thing. They'd play tracks for people, and then they would comment.
Yep.
And I'm almost positive that they played a Paul Motion Trio track for Stuart Copeland, and he kind of just like dogged it.
I remember that.
Really
What?
bad.
I do remember
Just
that.
saying like jazz is kind of stupid, and and I love Stuart Copeland. He's an MFer in the Police. He sounds great.
Yeah.
And then I think they played something very similar for Erskine and then it said like when they played it, like I remember it saying like Erskine stands up and bowed when they like to the Motion Trio.
Wow,
you know?
wow.
And I remember that made me like want to. Okay, I gotta check this out.
I gotta check that
Peter
out.
Erskine's saying it's killing. I know he's not gonna steer me wrong. You know?
Yeah.
So why I brought that up is there's some freer playing on this example.
Cool.
And it's a little more dense than how motion plays, and Paul's become like one of my all-time favorite drummers and band leaders, but I hear some of that in here, and I'm
cool.
sure it's coming from all kind of different places,
Yeah,
Elvin and Jack DeJohnette and everybody else.
Yeah.
But
Let's hear it.
let's give it a listen.
All right, this is 1 minute and 50 seconds in.
It's called Anthem.
That is it for this week's episode. Stay tuned next week. We'll come back to this and we'll wrap up part 2 of 10 Reasons I Love Peter Erskine. If you like the show, please make sure you give us a review on iTunes, wherever you're getting this podcast. Should be available on all podcast platforms. If you're watching this on YouTube, make sure you like it. Make sure you subscribe to the Drum Factory Direct channel. Hit us with some comments about some of your favorite Peter Erskine tracks. And we'll see you next week.